So is there anything from the last two seminars that you want to chat about, have a question about, expand upon, don't agree with? Anything you'd like the panel to discuss?
Yes, but it's, sorry, you? Me?
Is there any?
You too.
Are you gonna go?
No, you are.
Okay,
Sorry.
so I wanted to ask, especially like with Luca, like you study, you studied and you're actually an artist, and now you're also taking this like gallerist curatorial like role. Like how do you juggle both? Like for instance, I'm studying something creative adjacent, it's not necessarily creative degree, but I'm really interested in becoming like a curatorial gallerist. Like how do you if I'm wearing like both of these caps, like how do you manage when like having multiple jobs, having multiple like
It's hard. I think one thing I've noticed, a strategy or thing I've noticed myself doing is just choosing which job to talk about when I meet someone, because I'm working like 4 different roles. So if I'm meeting someone who's interested in my work as an artist, then I will talk about that. And kind of like curating your CV a little bit. So like I recently applied for a curatorial residency. So I went through my CV and took out experience that wasn't relevant for that role. It is definitely challenging juggling though, but I think you sort of have to learn very quickly how to frame the different roles that you do. And you kind of, in a professional setting, need to learn how to like pitch your work in one line, which is hard when you're doing a lot of different things. But I think being strategic in how you frame yourself, both when you're applying to things or just when you're meeting people, is important. Yeah, that would be my advice. But I also just sort of knowing you can't keep everything. Like I studied neuropsychology before I did art. But that's not relevant
that's what I'm
if I'm
talking about.
applying to an art job. So that's not going to come up. Even though it has probably informed things and is part of my experience, but don't unload everything on someone when you're meeting them. I would say like be strategic with the experience that you bring forward. And you can see everything else as part of your broader practice. But yeah, if you meet someone and you tell them you reel off 4 different things, it's going to be harder to kind of open a conversation.
Yeah, and also I think, there's kind of a combination of timing and, your personal journey, but I was on a stepladder installing my MA degree show at Slade, like my physical degree show. And Andrew Renton pulled on my trousers, and because we were on the postgraduate committee together with the school, and he's like, I need somebody to work with me on this new collection that's opening, and I want you to do it. And I was like, okay. And that was the point where my visual arts career shifted to the sideline. And then suddenly this other career took off where I was meeting incredibly important people and building a very important collection. And it almost just, invariably, something supersedes something else. Something happens. You get offered an exhibition and it's too big for you to do without letting go of something else. So it can't remain concurrent indefinitely. Something will take over, depending on what it is in life.
And also with most people who come into curatorial practice have done other things first. Like everyone I know who's a curator either started as an artist or, now they're degrees in curatorial practice, but that's very recent. Until now, most people have come towards it with quite varied experience. And sometimes you end up kind of making up the role that you want and then working towards it.
Well, it is a multifaceted role, that's for sure.
Yeah, I suffer from the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is the less you know, the more confident you are. So when we started, we were like, art gallery, you just have to 4 walls, put some paintings up. And then when you actually realize what it entails, then it actually gets more challenging. But I also think that it's not for everyone, but I like to learn by like jumping headfirst into something and figuring it out, because that also really allows me to do it my own way. Where it's like if you go through and there's obviously value of going through like formal education with something, but if you don't, then if you've got a challenge in front of you, you don't have a pre-prescribed way of doing it. You become more creative because there's no kind of box.
I mean, look, there are ways to do there are certain bottom line things that everyone has to do. You know, you have to be transparent, and you have to pay your artists, and you can't lie about the provenance of works. You know, there's certain legal things that one should do. But yeah, I mean, I think if anything in this country, there's a fluidity to being able to become part of the creative dialogue without necessarily following the traditional route to begin with, for sure. There was a question on the side first, and then we'll go to you.
Okay, I have a question. How do you arrange a new gallery and price-wise? Because I feel like you said your price last week when you have art, right? So now you're in a gallery and you have originals. But some people want maybe prints or smaller paintings. So does it define your gallery status if you have some original expensive paintings and then some prints that's less expensive, that's 2,000 Rand? How do you define that to make your gallery?
Well, I think it also depends on the artist stables. Like Lena was saying, you find artists, and some of those artists might have had exhibiting experience and have a price point already. But I mean, I know galleries, not necessarily, I know European galleries that have opened up and they're showing Picasso and Dali and Monet, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's also about the market space. Where are the gaps in the market? You know, what are the artists that are of interest? Those artists, you know, where have they been exhibiting? How much have they been selling for? Have they not been selling? What are their contemporaries doing? So it's a comparative point. That's not to say the prices can't go up, but one of the dangers in the industry is that galleries get associated with a certain echelon of collector base and a certain echelon of price point, you know? And so there's one art fair that they don't sell anything. Which one is it? The Turbine. And nothing's more than 20, 30,000 Rand an artwork. So that's a certain kind of tier, but it does limit things.
I mean, part of it is also about paying attention to everything that's happening around you. All the other local galleries in other cities, galleries in other countries, and just taking in as much information as possible so that you can position yourself based on the kind of rest of the ocean of the art world, because the prices for art exist because of other galleries and other artists, and because of historical prices for certain things. I mean, you asked about prints. We carry prints by some of our artists. We have a huge price range. Works from, we probably have something for 2,000 Rand up to several million Rand. So I don't think any of that takes away from who we are as a gallery at the moment.
There's also like, you also have to look around if you're establishing a gallery space. Who is your competition, your immediate competition? So it's like Lena's saying, you know, a gallery that's just opening its doors is not going to look to a blue chip gallery as its competition. It's going to look around and see which other galleries are showing similar artists, similar trajectories and periods, you know, their career periods. And that's their competition. And it's like, so I'm going to start competing for those collectors, for those people spending money there. And then it builds up, you know? It's not the entire industry necessarily.
Yeah, so actually I wanted to ask exactly about that, about how do commercial galleries navigate competing for sought after artists, and how much of that is part of the job?
The diplomatic answer for that is to say that we are always keeping our eyes open. Everyone knows everyone else's business, and we really do know everyone else's business. But the reality is that each gallery has its own ethos, its own energy, its own kind of language of artists. It's stable. You look at any of the galleries, you'll see there's a certain kind of feel, a temperament, an aesthetic, an agenda. So it makes no sense for a gallery to go looking for an artist. It makes no sense for us to go actively looking for an artist that does temporal work and video installations. Two reasons. First of all, that's not the languages that we work in. And if we were going to sustain that artist, we don't have a collector base who buys that kind of work. So, you know, you have to find the right, we talked about this last week, you have to find the right kind of marrying of circumstances. We as a gallery do not actively go out and poach other artists from other galleries, but we will always engage if artists express interest. And it's usually quite a lengthy conversation, because it's like, it takes a lot for an artist to sever a relationship with an existing gallery and move to another one. It's traumatic, and financially it's also a very big risk. So everyone has to be on the same page that it's a good idea. But yeah, we've always got our eyes open. We'll always entertain all kinds of offers and conversations.
So one question, art insurance, when the art goes up, who's responsible for the art when it's in the gallery? Because obviously the gallery is
Yeah, well, we have comprehensive insurance, and the moment something gets taken into stock in the gallery, it is insured in transit and in shipping and in the gallery premises. Do not work with the gallery that does not have insurance. Warning signal number one. You know, that's a basic, that's good business practice. You know, so yeah, so it is the gallery's responsibility to insure work from the moment of receiving it, and that includes taking it out of an artist's studio.
So you insure it on the retail, the estimated retail cost, not the cost. I don't know how to explain it, but obviously the cost.
Replacement cost.
Yes, replacement.
So it's like if this was to go up in a ball of flames, God forbid, how much would it cost to buy something just like this and replace it? So that's the value, yeah.
In connection to the replacement cost, when you're going to an insurance and trying to create that establishment, is that where certificates of authenticity, previous sale records, are those kind of the elements they look at when you go to a shipping place for insurance to kind of set up transit?
So shipping or insurance company?
In a shipping company to set up insurance with them, if you're going to be working with a specific.
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously the price point that the work's been sold at is the first starting point. And then sometimes certificates of authenticity are usually issued to collectors or to auction houses for the purposes of resale. Insurance companies just want to see what you've paid for it, you know. And also sometimes, and I'm not, this isn't totally 100% accurate because I don't work with the insurance section of the gallery, but you know, you can purchase a painting for 100,000 and insure it for 40. You know what I mean? You can insure it for whatever you want because you pay the value to the insurance company for the transit. That said, though, they want to see that there's a documentation that that's what's been paid for it, I would imagine.
Anyone else?
Any questions about anything?
This is a really good opportunity to ask any.
Or not, maybe everyone's like exhausted. There's a question there.
I wanted to know, like, in terms of like approaching artists and working with their work, like what is the etiquette of doing that? And on the other side, as an artist, you know, like the brass tacks of like how do you present a piece of work, and you know, how do you wrap it, and you know, like a very practical question, but on both sides, like how does that work?
So when you say etiquette, give me a little bit more understanding.
Well, like what's the appropriate way to approach someone, you know, where and how and through what means would you do that? And then also like how do you look after their work? And
how do we look after their work?
Yes. Yeah.
How do you approach somebody? You can stalk them online. I'm not kidding. You can be introduced through a social setting. You know, you can stumble into a group show. You can be sent a portfolio. You can be recommended from somebody. You can, you know, see something on social media. There's all manner of ways of the etiquette. You know, we do have conversations with artists where we're a little bit more forward and we're like, we really think this idea is a good idea. How do you feel about it? Like sometimes with Cubicle, we'll make that offer if we think it's exciting and we've all been talking about it. We talk a lot, you know, like about things. And we also show each other ideas a lot, you know. We're all whizzing around we've got various, you know, groups on WhatsApp, and we're all whizzing around with, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Don't like this, do you like that? What about this artist? So there's a lot of exchange of information, and I think that's very, very important. You know, nobody keeps their cards to their chest. And you just keep your eyes open and you make yourself privy to the whole industry, you know? That's another reason why we represent artists of various price points. If we only represented artists that sold for 12 million, you know, that's not the point. The point is that we want a broad spectrum. How do we look after work? Well, we wrap it very nicely, we crate it very nicely, we take care of it, you know.
I mean, that's also part of everyone on the gallery team having as much experience as possible from the ground up. And part of that is art handling, how to wrap an artwork, what materials to use. So everybody who works here should know the basics
And
of
have
how to
done
do
it.
that. I mean, I think on my day one in 2006, I was taught about bubbles on the outside when it comes to bubble wrap. So there are a lot of practical tips, and it's literally just about learning that on the ground. And I mean, YouTube, there's some fantastic YouTube videos as well.
And also you do learn the hard way sometimes. Do you know what I
And
mean?
you do learn the hard way sometimes. I mean, I once had an artist delivering an artwork to the gallery, and she had tied it to the top of her car, and it was a work on canvas, and the entire thing snapped in half. So she delivered a painting that was,
And we've had artists ship things to us, and it's literally been stuck together. And then we've waited for her to fly in, and we were like all panicking, and she just went, "It's fine." We were like, "Are you sure?" "Yes, it's fine." We're like, okay, you know. But yeah, I mean, it's decades between all of us. It's hundreds of years of experience, you know, and the logistics team as well. You know, huge amount of experience with the right ways to ship things, the right ways to create things, you know. Yeah.
So next workshop.
I think also just a practical thing with that, if you're not applying for like a gallery internship, but you want a little bit of experience, a really good way is just assisting an artist. And you'll get small experience because you're only going to see one person's practice. But if you assist for like a quite commercially successful artist, you will gain a lot of that experience very quickly. Like when I was working for Brett, I was meeting people at Everard Read. I was helping package the work.
Yeah.
So you can kind of borrow experience from established artists, and they're always looking for assistance.
Emphasis on the word established, you know, because you have to be able to learn something from the experience.
And then you'll learn about the gallery, you'll learn about packaging the work, you'll see those relationships happening. You can read the contracts if you want to, if they're lying around the studio. You know, it's a good way to gain access to what being a professional artist looks like. Because I think from the outside, it's very hard to gauge. You know, when you walk into a gallery, you don't really know all of the steps that are going into making that work and getting it into the gallery. So I think that's a good idea.
Where is just in terms of that conversation, that in terms of the response to that question, is where exactly is the handover from the artist's responsibility to you and from you to the rest? In other
Are we
words,
talking from insurance?
for example, no. For example, just the delivery, in terms of getting the work to you, do you take responsibility for that, or do you do that for certain artists? Or do they, and then you're responsible, clearly
Depends.
shipping and post-sale and so on.
Every situation is unique. Every personality is unique. Every situation is unique.
Okay. So
you know,
sometimes you'll go and pick up works.
we always go and pick up works.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes artists deliver them because they're in the area. You know, we ship works from all over the world from artists. Sometimes they make their own crates. Sometimes we get things created. We had one artist, Lucy Jane Turpin, I think I can give this example. She was about to send the works from Italy, and the Italian government needed a written letter of declaration that she could export it. And she had to apply for an opportunity to apply for a written letter from the Italian government that she could take her own works.
And a physical letter.
And a physical letter. And so she literally rolled them up, put them in a thing, and got on the plane and arrived here with them. You know what I mean? And we were setting it all up, but we were all waiting for the Italian government to give her a you know. So, but I mean, that's, the artist produces the work. They do it in a capacity where it is archivally sound. So what I mean by that, it's not going to fall apart. It's going to sustain itself. It's not made with dangerous materials or toxic materials or materials that just haven't got a lifespan, especially if you're selling it. And then they contact the gallery, and as the gallery, our responsibility lies with administration, logistics, and and relationship building with clients. So we will drive sometimes. We will arrange shipping. We have two different shipping departments. We have an international shipping department and local. Oh, and then we have when we have really local, like internal, like Cape Town Peninsula. But we also have South Africa.
I mean, that said, we're lucky enough here to have a big truck that we can fit artworks in.
Yeah, and I used to when I was
galleries who don't have the same.
No, when I was working with a smaller infrastructure, I used to put things in my own car. strap them onto the top and drive. There was one instance in my convertible, anyway. But yeah, no, you make a plan. You know, if you haven't got an infrastructure, you make a plan. You know?
And also, I think it's also about if you don't have that infrastructure internally, there are people who provide that service for you that you can develop relationships with and say that you are my
and pay sometimes
outsourced career.
But I will just jump in to say this is why paperwork is so important, and condition reporting is very important, because if something leaves an artist studio and arrives at the gallery and it's been damaged, we need to know whose responsibility the damage was.
So we have earmarked for our team that they will take photographs of work if they have to inspect the work and take photographs. When things come back from third-party loans, we have to open up the crates and take photographs. You know, like you have to keep a paper trail.
So, I just want to ask, how do you cultivate a client base? Being a young gallery, one of the most
That's obviously for you. I'm over 100.
One of the most important thing, of course, besides handling the artwork and working with the artist and have good art, is actually selling. And the only way how you can sell is by having a client base.
Yes.
And if you're young and not, well connected or whatever it is, how do you cultivate it, especially in an area where people don't usually go to buy art?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like maybe if you're in town, it's maybe easier, but if you're not like yourself, or how do you do it? How do you build a client base?
Yeah, I mean, like it's a challenge that we're going through, but I think that's once we do make a sale, it's very important for us to really check up and even check in after 2 months of the sale. Are you enjoying the piece? Is it hung up? It's really kind of having those open lines of communication, and also when there's new artworks coming in, a new portfolio, we've got a database of people who leave their emails. So we've got a massive database of people who come in, and we always ask them if you want to keep up with what's going on within the gallery, and mostly they do because of the uniqueness of the places. They leave their email addresses, and then we even got like a comment section of do you want this to be on the newsletter, or do you want us to directly email you the portfolio? You know, so we really kind of look at it as the whole database, but then having client by client, understanding what has happened with that client. If it's a sale, we follow up to see if they've got the work. If they want a portfolio, we'll send them a portfolio directly.
Yeah, so that's a really, really important point. So obviously people walk into the gallery, they buy an artwork, that's first prize. But if they don't, what are they looking for? You know, you have lists, you have, you know, everyone has their own formula to do this, but you know, sometimes you wait a year to place a work with a collector. Sometimes you remember in the back of the mind, this person really liked this artist's work. Oh my goodness, he's just made a similar, you know. I had a conversation about one work on the art fair 9 months before the work was even made. And we'd had very clear brief for our art booth. We wanted monochromatic. And I was talking to her and she's saying, I just want one. I said, well, actually the brief this year is monochromatic. So I will come back to you in 9 months and I will offer it to you. And I did. And she took it, you know, lucky me. But I'm just trying to say, you take the opportunities and you expand upon the opportunities. You don't just wait for them to walk in and buy something. It's a long-term investment.
Yeah, 100%.
The previous question was like about like how to attract like new artists like to your space, and I want to ask Luca, like for other projects, like I understand like you have to like send an application for it, like how do you choose which one to accept, and are there instances where you have to like go out of women, can you please show here, and like what's your operations like, what goes on when you're trying to like
yeah, so in terms of new artists, we look at degree shows often. We like try to attend all of the grad shows if we want to find someone new. And then we usually try balance our programming with having more established artists and newer artists. We do take sort of open applications, but we end up saying no to most proposals because we have quite a sort of curated vision in terms of what kind of projects work for us and work with what we're trying to do. And then we also are very aware of our community. So people who come to our exhibitions, if they approach us, and we've seen them every month at our shows, and they approach us and propose a project, we're much more likely to say yes because we've kind of established a relationship with them. But yeah, I mean, when I've put shows together and I want someone I haven't met, it's usually on Instagram. It's quite hard finding new artists. Particularly, it's hard finding artists outside of Cape Town, we found. But we also ask people, and on most of our group shows, we will try to make sure we have at least half of the artists are recognizable names, and then sort of throw the newer artists in with there. But yeah, I think just like showing up a lot goes quite a long way for us. And we also, between the four of us, we will never show something that we haven't all signed off on. So before every show and before every program, we sit together and we think like, okay, where has this artist showed? We look at their sort of older body of work or what they're doing now. And there's quite a lot of back and forth. It's not just like if we like someone, we show them. We kind of will think about it a little bit strategically. And yeah, I think that's kind of how it works. But we read every proposal we get sent. But if it's like an artist we don't know who wants to do a solo show, that's not super interesting for us as a project space, but if they have like an interesting project or they're doing something, bringing new people in, we're more likely to say yes to that.
Thank you.
Sure.
With international shipments, how do you kind of negate the fluctuations in the currency conversions from rand to, you guys are in London, so I'm assuming pound. Do you kind of have a set formula where you take an average over a certain amount of time, or do you kind of, only work based on in the moment when you're doing that shipment or?
It depends on the artist, but 99% of the artists that we represent, primary market space is here. So what that means is that their price point is set here, and when things get shipped to London, the costs are split 50-50, not 60-40 to start off with. And secondly, the costs of shipping and the import duties et al. Are added onto the selling price. So the price on the wall there is the price that someone would pay if they bought it here and shipped it to London. Within reason, you know what I mean? I will mention that we have really struggled with shipping in the last 2 years. In fact, at least half a dozen times in this year alone, I personally have not secured sales because of shipping quotes. So it really, really is tough out there to use a reliable, trustworthy professional shipper who gives you a quote and you know the painting is going to arrive in one piece or the sculpture is going to arrive. And then the quotes come in with dollars and euros, and it's ridiculous. We've had paintings for 48,000 and the shipping quote's 50,000 and the person's like, and we've lost a lot of sales because of shipping. So it's tough, it's really tough for artists when, the international currencies don't work for us.
Yeah. And I think that that's also something that we've really kind of realized is that once someone, especially from overseas, likes the work and they want to buy it, it doesn't mean that the sale's concluded. The sale's only concluded once they have accepted the shipping quotes and the money's in the account, essentially. So it becomes it's elongated, essentially, and the shipping quotes, even for us, has also kind of, we lost sales just because it's like 20,000 Rand work and shipping cost 20,000 too. So it is very much a challenge that I don't see really going away.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no shortcut here. Like we've used shipping agents and works have arrived damaged. We had one artist who never had a problem in her life. We shipped with our usual agent. It arrived in Belgium. It was as if someone had taken the crate and shook it violently, and this entire thing was destroyed. And that was absolutely disastrous. First of all, it was a commission, and second of all, we then had to bring the work back to this country. The artist had to remake it and send it again. The cost implications were huge. Insured, so it was covered. But I mean, like, sometimes it's an absolute disaster. Situations, pallet trucks driving through crates, people stepping on crates showing gunpowder residue. When one of Ricky's paintings got stopped in Germany, and they were like, the collector called me hysterical, saying, they've told me there's gunpowder residue. What is that? I'm like, there's no gunpowder residue. You know, all manner of things. Crates ending up in Denver when they should be in, you know, London. And that's just with designated proper shippers. So what's that company that does shipping for artists? Do you know
Artist
it?
admin.
Artist admin's supposed to be quite good. I've heard. And no, I don't own a percentage of the company. Oh, a question from the cameraman. Oh, is my speaker.
Sound good, no. Just on the idea of, you know, you wear many hats and you do all the things yourself and all of the stuff. Where would one invest if you do get a bit of money? Like, where is it best to start like outsourcing stuff to other people? Is it in shipping? Is it in marketing? Like, where would you, once you first start getting some money and you really want to start growing, where would you put your money?
I mean, I think part of that is based on your personality. So if marketing is not your strength, then that's where your money should go. If admin is not your strength, that's where your money should go. So it really depends on who you are as a person and where your strengths are.
I would say rather hire better staff and pay them more and take care of them and have a loyalty, you know, than outsource. You know, rather invest in the infrastructure of your gallery and reward the staff properly.
And particularly because the art world is such a strange creature that you need people who are experienced and focused in the art world. So someone who does PR in general might not understand how that works in the art world.
They never do. But yeah, I mean, the thing is that if you take care of your staff and you retain them, and the wealth of knowledge and experience that they come, and their relationships with collectors and their relationships with artists and their understanding of the infrastructure and the history. I mean, you know, we have people in this gallery who've been here, 20 years, 25 years, you know, and it's like, people remember. So you have this wealth of knowledge to go back, and then that pays dividends far more than outsourcing someone to do something on your behalf.
Yeah, I mean, that said, I think documentation of the artworks is incredibly important because you are interfacing these days more and more digitally with your audience. So if you have good photos of your work, makes a huge difference.
That's critical now, more than ever, because online has increased
and
exponentially.
there are photographers who specialize in fine art photography. Get them on your side.
You can see who they are by going on our website.
Difference. Yeah.
No, I mean, seriously, it's a very good point, Lena. You know, like, more than anything, photographic documentation.
Is there a rule of thumb for commission that a gallery takes for a new gallery? I know
it depends. It depends.
I know, but is there a rule of thumb like how you start it?
What do you mean, like what percentage the gallery takes, or?
Like the percentage between the gallery and the artist, is there like a...
It's not, well, it depends. It's either 50-50 or 60-40. Yeah, depending.
Yeah.
Lady in the hat in the back.
On the topic of you just speaking about the digital, I guess, challenges that you have at the moment, and you mentioned holding paintings on your car, breaking, and all these, you know, in the metaverse, those sort of things don't necessarily become a problem. But with today's shift into this digital world, how are you finding as gallerists, as curators, and even as artists, how are you finding your mindset changing and the future of like what you do? How is that impacting? So this whole change, what are the biggest, like, I guess, scares and fears, and also one of the biggest opportunities in the South African market with this change? Very, very broad question.
Anyone want to answer this first?
I'm happy to. I mean,
okay, you go first.
Well, I think first of all, it's just exponentially increased your reach. So your audiences are much bigger, which is generally beneficial. But that said, I do think the experience of seeing an artwork in person, nothing is ever going to change that. So you do have access to more art. Audiences have access to a wider range. We have access to a bigger audience, but nothing changes being in a gallery space and engaging with the work physically. And so I think that's something that's never going to go away.
And also, as things exponentially increase, so does the amount of bad art out there. So, you know, like, actually, I mean, yeah. So let's see. I mean, certainly we've had a lot of our artists try out doing NFTs. Nobody has hit the jackpot. You know, there's not been any success in that front. Let's see, you know.
Thank you.
Sure.
Two questions. One is if there's costs involved, so you do a show and you now need to do framing, and say it's an emerging artist, they don't have, the expense, to pay for their framing, etc. How do you cover it and then deduct it from a sale, and then you get your commission? Is that
every gallery is different.
Yeah.
Our gallery, the framing is for the artist account, which means inevitably the artist ends up paying. If there's a financial constraint, then the gallery does pay for framing in advance. But then as soon as there's sales, then we recoup that. And it doesn't necessarily mean like there have to be sales. It can take years. But yeah, we want, if we're invested in making a show manifest, then within reason we're invested in making contributions.
And also, quickly, another question. If, for example, you believe in the artist, would you financially support them or buy their work because maybe it's not their time yet, or you want to do an exhibition for them later or whatever, but you feel it's good artists, it's good art, and you just need to help them along? Would you as a gallery do it, or any of obviously the question?
That's a very good question. I mean, look, circumstances have happened in the past where, a work has been. I mean, I sold some work a while ago, and I turned around and bought 2 pieces from this gallery after the sale. 2 younger artists who I knew, whose work I admired, but also who I knew needed some kind of financial contribution. But you obviously want to cultivate a collector base, and you want to cultivate success where you're not buying in work necessarily. So that isn't necessarily the right approach to make.
And just to your first question with regards to the framing, I think it becomes a bit of a challenge if, for example, you are framing an artist's work that doesn't sell, and then now that artist wants to take their work back to maybe go sell it somewhere else, then it becomes a challenging issue, So that's why for us, we would rather let the artists frame the work, so that if it happens not to sell, then at least the work can go back to them without any kind of discourse with regards to the framing.
So what a rule of thumb in that kind of circumstance is sometimes is, let's say that you've invested in the framing in advance and an artist wants to take some works back, then galleries usually buy in a work in that instance to offset the costs of all the framing. So they choose a work from the artist. Great, guys. Thank you very much.